Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 723. My opponent kicked off with e4 and I went, not there, kicked off with e4 and I went knight f6 trying to play the Alechin's defense. And instead of e5, the main move here, which would get to the Alechin's defense proper, he went knight c3. So we've really, after e5, this just transposes into the Vienna game. I could keep it in unique channels by playing d5, but well, there's nothing wrong with the Vienna game from Black's point of view. This is a fine position from which it's pretty easy to defend and get equality. White played the really interesting and enterprising move d4 here. Not a move I'd seen before. It almost looks like a gambit, but if you take this pawn, he can take that pawn, so that's not particularly good. This pawn on e4 will be kind of a thorn in your side, so taking the pawn is really the best move. You can see the opening book has d6 as a large number of games with that position, but actually it's referring to the position after you play d6 has a lot of games because you usually get to it from other move orders. In this particular position, the best move here is clearly to take the pawn, and the chess engine affirms. And actually, Black is a little better. White has given up the opening advantage and turned it over to Black at this point. But, well, White has an interesting and novel position. He's got a pawn in the center and a queen out early, which is often a liability rather than an asset. But it's interesting play. It's not like it's losing immediately. It's just that Black, with correct play, it gets an advantage. And the correct play would start here with the move bishop to b4. I didn't actually play this. I thought briefly about getting the bishop outside the pawn chain before playing d6, which is a logical move here. But I was a little worried about him pushing e5 immediately. So I checked this out. It turns out after bishop to b4, if he pushes immediately, I can just castle. And there's no problem here. He can't take the knight because of the threat of rook to e8, winning material. So all this turns out to be fine. And I probably have time to play rook e8 and d6 before I can really generate any kind of threat against my knight, because it takes a couple of moves to unpin. Even if the queen moves away, the king is still pinned. So the pawn is still pinned against the king, I mean. So that would be good for very good for Black. Actually, the best play here for White is after bishop to b4 to continue with bishop to d2. And then after I castle and he castles queenside, still going for that dynamic play. I mean, it's an interesting position, but Black is fine here with rook e8. Black has slight edge in development. White has a little space in the center. And the queen could be either an asset or a liability, depending on if I can use that to gain some tempos. But this would be that position with the slight edge for Black that opening would logically lead to. Let's see. Instead, I played d6 immediately. And now White is actually fine. White actually has his opening advantage back again. Let's see. Now there's still a few more moves in the opening book. Let's see. He went here, went bishop e7. He went knight f3, and at this point we're out of the book. So, but what I said is still true. Let's see. I castled. He castled. We can pause here, and we've nearly completed our development, and we can assess the position. It looks like the development is even, and White has a little edge in space. So there's slight opening advantage to White because I didn't take best advantage of White's opening play. So I continued here with knight a5, harassing his bishop. He dropped back to d3. And it's not like there's anything wrong with my position either. It's still just a normal game at this point. Let's see, I went bishop e6, getting my last piece off the back rank. He went b3, which is interesting. It gives a square for his bishop to go to, and it also takes this c4 square away from my knight. So I decided to drop my knight back to c6. And he went in with knight to g5, hitting my bishop here. I didn't especially want to give up that bishop. I thought about it for a while, but I decided I'd rather keep the bishop. I went bishop g4, which the engine rates is okay. Goes f3. In a way, I'm kind of trying to provoke that because now there's he has to be wary of threats along this diagonal. So, maybe I can get some shots in there later. And in general, it weakened his king side a little bit. And I dropped back with my bishop to h5. The chess engine actually wants to bring the bishop back to c8. Kind of a funny idea, but it thinks that's fine. Thinks this is okay, but it likes bishop to c8 better. Let's see. And he goes bishop to b2, maybe a little mistake, because now there's a tactic here. So why don't you see if you can spot the idea. It doesn't win material, but it kind of gives some edge to black. So yeah, pause the video here if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. The answer is, the tactic the chess engine pointed out was knight to g4. And well, it's a double attack. Bishop and queen are lined up at a battery on his knight, and my knight is attacking his queen, so he should probably take the knight. And then the other point of the tactic is, when I take his knight, I take it with another tempo on the queen. And after the queen drops back, then my bishop has a chance to drop back. So I didn't lose material, I didn't win material, but I did succeed in disorganizing white's pawns a little bit around the king side and giving him an isolated e-pawn, which I could attack later. So slight edge to black after that. I didn't spot that idea, which I really should have thought of, because I have this battery lined up against the knight, so I should have taken a second there to look at what kind of interesting discoveries there were with the knight. I might have found that. Anyway, I just went bishop to g6. I was wanting to get this bishop back to a more active square. He went f4, went h6, kicking his knight. Knight drops back to h3. I go rook to e8. He goes rook a to d1. So both of us are, cancel that, rook a to d1. Both of us are activating our pieces. So I went knight b4 here. I was thinking of taking a look at his bishop there, maybe trading it off. And also, well, it hits this pawn. I don't know if that has any significance. I don't think knight b4 is a particularly great move in retrospect. Anyway, he played f5, and here I played bishop to h5. Maybe a safer and saner move would have been to play bishop to h7. I mean, I can try and break my bishop out of jail later with the move g6, and then I can try and bring pressure to bear on the f-pawn. If he doesn't take, I will take there and give him an f-pawn that I can attack, perhaps. Anyway, it's an idea. The chess engine actually doesn't count bishop h5 as a mistake. It rates those two moves as about equal. But I would say it's much harder to play with the bishop out here. Always have to worry about it being trapped or being just shut out of the game entirely. Let's see, he went rook to d2. I mean, I do gain a tempo with that move. He has to move the rook. And then I went knight takes d3. So that was a mistake, although I guess this was the main idea of the knight there, was to swap off that bishop. So that's why I say in retrospect maybe knight b4 was not such a great idea. The chess engine says the way to kind of justify my play to this point is to play a move like d5. And, well, if he pushes that pawn forward, I can take advantage of the pin on the queen, maybe throw in bishop to d6 there, or knight to g4, hitting the queen. There's various things I can do, and so the chess engine gives the here's the line: e5, if e5, knight to g4, queen to e1 to keep that pawn defended, and then bishop to f6, going after the pawn that way. So I can double up on that pawn. So after d5, it's not so great to push on with e5, and his best move is to unpin with queen to g3, then maybe bishop d6, hitting his queen again, and knight to f4. And we get this kind of complicated position where my bishop is under threat, but his knight is pinned. Who knows how I will ever unwind, but the chess engine thinks this is fine. Anyway, yeah, after knight takes d3, I think, which is what I played in the game, I think this bishop is in trouble, and if white had played accurately, he could probably win the game from here. He took with the rook, that's correct. And let's see, I went bishop to f8, just clearing the rooks. So I'm taking a look at the e-pawn, and I was thinking about pushing the d-pawn forward to undermine it. He went queen g3 here, which seems to be a mistake. So one thing he could try here is knight to f4, and I think this just wins the bishop. The chess engine didn't find any great way to save it. First, bishop to g4 looks good because, well, you've got a pin on this pawn, so you're actually threatening to take on f4 with this f5 rather, with the knight on f4. It's left this pawn hanging in a way, but he can play queen g3 here, and it's hitting the bishop, and doesn't seem to be any good way to save it. It'll chase the bishop back to h5 there. So the chess engine says to kind of give up on the bishop and play like this with c6, say h3, trying to trap the bishop, and b5, pushing pawns forward on the queen side, g4, winning the bishop, and giving up the bishop for a pawn, and then playing d5. That's how the chess engine thinks is best play for black, and it gives white only a one pawn advantage here, which is kind of surprising because white is really up a piece. But maybe there's some fragility here in the pawn structure. Maybe I get another piece, or maybe I get some pressure on his king. His king is kind of opened up. There are still ideas. I mean, this diagonal is still open, so it's not like it's a hopeless game for black, but white is certainly in the driver's seat in that position, it looks like to me. Instead, he unpinned right away with queen g3, and this allows me just to take. I don't know why I didn't play this, but just knight takes e4. Would have been a good move here. Hits his queen, hits his pawn, and improves my prospects for saving this bishop. So that would have been a move. Let's see, I went queen e7. He went knight to d5. Once again, knight f4 is a little more accurate going after the bishop, but knight d5, yeah, kind of lets me off the hook a little bit. Cancel that. Where are we? Let's see. He went. I went queen to e7. Okay, sorry. And he went knight to d5. So like I said, once again, knight f4 would have been the move here. I took his knight, and then he played the really horrible move, queen takes g7. So before we take a look at that and the rest of the game, he should just take my knight here. And then I could play something like queen e4, trying to activate my queen. He's still got this knight f4 move going after my bishop. And the way the chess engine wants to get out of this is really kind of clever. Wants to take this pawn and defend the bishop that way. And this looks good at first, but there's a discovered attack on the queen, which black can exploit with knight to e6, which now he's got three pieces aimed at the g7 square. And the chess engine thinks best play here is actually to give up the queen for two pieces. So pawn takes, rook takes, and pawn takes. So I get the knight and the rook for the queen, and this pawn is still defended on g7. Now he's reduced to queen and bishop. So yeah, I've got a rook and bishop and pawn for his queen. I mean, the chess engine gives a slight edge to white. I think I'd rather be white in this position, but it's close. It's a playable position apparently. But instead he went with queen takes g7, and then after I took his queen, he wanted to take back, but that's just not okay. That's it's not like that was a mouse slip. That was clearly a deliberate move. Where else was the queen going except to take on g7? So I made him play out the rest of the game. So he continued to play, maybe somewhat annoyed that I didn't accept his take back, but I don't think that's okay. Chess, you're supposed to think before you move. Let's see. So he went e takes d5. Yeah, he gets my knight. So what do we get material wise? Yeah, he doesn't. He's just down a whole queen because his bishop is still hanging. And he went knight f4 here. So I have two rooks, a queen, and a bishop, and he has two rooks and a knight. Yeah, I have actually a queen and a bishop against a knight. So a queen and two bishops against a knight. So a queen and a bishop extra, I guess. But I didn't play, I guess I was a little rattled after that. I play this queen g5 move, which is just asking for trouble, and I'm sort of lucky that I didn't have to give up more than one piece to save this. But I managed to extricate myself from that position and still remained a queen up. And I think that was the last exciting move in the game. He tries to kick me around a little bit, but he never really got anything going. And he was trying perhaps to get some more pressure against my king with his rooks, but I walked my king away, and it's pretty safe in the middle of the board here. And so nothing worked, and then he traded off his last remaining pieces and resigned here. But this is actually a forced mate in 3. The chess engine says, I'm not sure what his best move is, but there's a mate in 3, a mate in 2 threat with queen there check and rook here mate. The best he can do is stave that off for 1 move. So forced mate at this point. Anyway, it's kind of a fun game. Little ups and downs and chess philosophy there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you later. Bye.